Have you ever felt like you're just reading from a script you never actually learned? From a simple conversation at the store to, well, something as deep as attraction. Our lives are kind of guided by these invisible codes and unspoken rules. Today, we are going to decode them. Let's get into it. First, we're going to look at our brain's automatic shortcuts. Then, we'll dive into the powerful personas that create attraction. After that, we'll uncover these predictable little games that run our daily interactions. And finally, stick around, because we're going to reveal the one master key that unlocks a much more genuine connection. All right, so first up, the automatic brain. Look, to get through the day, our minds have to rely on a whole series of mental shortcuts. We just don't have the time or energy to analyze every single little decision. So instead, we kind of run on these pre-programmed tapes. And this brings us to this fascinating idea called Click-Whir. It's pretty simple. Think about a mother turkey. She will nurture anything that makes a cheep, cheep sound. It's the sound of her chicks, right? That sound is the click. And her mothering behavior, that's the whir. It's so automatic that researchers found she would even mother a stuffed polecat, which is her natural enemy, as long as it had a little recorder inside playing that cheep, cheep sound. It's just a totally automatic, unconscious response. And believe it or not, this same exact principle works on us humans, often in really surprising ways. Here's a real-life example for you. A store owner, she just could not sell this turquoise jewelry. She got so frustrated, she left a note for her staff to cut the price in half. But they misread it, and they doubled the price instead. So what do you think happened? The entire lot sold out, like, immediately. The customers, who are mostly wealthy tourists, were running on a really simple shortcut. Expensive equals good. That high price tag, that was the click. And the frantic buying, that was the whir. Okay, so let's take that idea and see how these automatic responses play out in a much, much more complex arena. Human attraction. I mean, if a simple price tag can trigger us, just imagine the power of a carefully crafted persona. These are the scripts that really create seduction. The author, Robert Greene, he identified several of what he calls seductive archetypes. These are these powerful personas that tap directly into our deepest fantasies. You've got the siren, who offers overwhelming pleasure and just a hint of danger. The rake offers those forbidden thrills. And then there's the dandy. And the dandy is, well, particularly interesting in our modern world. The dandy is fascinating because we can't easily put them in a box. They're both masculine and feminine. They're charming and a little insolent, outrageous, but also subtle. A great example is Andy Warhol. Nobody could ever quite figure him out, and that mystery just created this irresistible gravity. People are just naturally drawn to those who seem to have written their own set of rules for life. Ultimately, all these archetypes work because they act like mirrors for our own hidden desires. Virginia Woolf wrote about how for centuries, women served as these looking glasses, reflecting men back at twice their natural size. Well, seductive archetypes do this for everybody. They reflect our own fantasies back at us, making us feel seen, making us feel amplified. Okay, so we've seen the big scripts of attraction, but what about the little ones, the micro scripts we'll run every single day? The small arguments and conversations that seem to follow a predictable, almost game-like pattern. A psychiatrist named Eric Berne developed a framework for this, and he called it transactional analysis. He basically proposed that at any given moment, we're operating from one of three ego states. There's the parent, which is our whole collection of taught rules and beliefs. Then there's the adult, which is our rational, data-processing self. And finally, the child, which is where all our feelings and impulses live. So a healthy interaction is usually adult to adult. But what Berne called a game starts when those communication lines get crossed. For example, one person asks a simple adult question like, "Hey, have you seen my keys?" And the other person responds from a critical parent state. "They're probably right where you carelessly left them." Boom. That triggers a defensive child response, and all of a sudden, you're not talking about keys anymore. You're playing a game. One of the most common games, one you've probably played a million times, is Why Don't You? Yes, but. Person A isn't actually looking for solutions. Their child ego state is really just looking for sympathy. But person B responds from a helpful parent state, offering all this advice. And person A just rejects every single suggestion with, yes, but. The real point of the game isn't to solve the problem. It's for the child to prove their problem is unsolvable. And that way, they get the reassurance they were actually looking for all along. So, we've looked at the automatic triggers, the seductive personas, the hidden games, and, it can all start to feel a little bit manipulative. But what if the most powerful tool of human connection isn't a trick at all? What if it's something way more authentic?
So on one side, you have pure tactics. Think of books like The Game, which promote these formulas, right? Like peacocking to stand out or negging to try and lower someone's self-esteem. But on the other side, you have something much, much simpler. Genuine curiosity. Just asking open-ended questions, actually listening to the answer, and exploring someone else's world with them.
Now look, those tactics, they can work. They can absolutely trigger a click-whir response and create some short-term interest. But they operate on a really flawed premise. See, they're designed to demonstrate your own value instead of discovering the value in someone else. And that's exactly where they ultimately fail. And this brings us to the true master key, what the author Ian Leslie calls the curiosity dividend. In a world where everybody is broadcasting, just trying to be interesting, the person who is genuinely interested, well, that person has a superpower. The ability to just stop talking, to listen, and to truly want to understand another person's story is probably the rarest and most magnetic trait of all. So let's just do a quick recap of the codes we've uncovered. First, our brains are literally wired to run on automatic Click-Whir triggers. Second, powerful personas and archetypes tap right into our deepest desires to create attraction. And third, a lot of our arguments and conflicts are really just predictable, repeatable games. But after understanding all these systems and all these scripts, the ultimate takeaway is surprisingly simple. The most effective, the most powerful, and honestly, the most fulfilling way to connect with another human being isn't about learning a better trick or some cleverer line. It's about developing a genuine desire to understand their story. So I'll just leave you with this question to think about. In your next conversation today, are you going to fall back on a script? Are you going to be playing a game? Or are you going to put all the tactics aside and choose instead to just be curious,